Welcome to Cherry Conversations, where we all overcome our uncertainties and juicy topics one conversation at a time. Each week we sit down with author, speaker, and pastor Sonny Hennessy and a special guest. This week our guest is Kayla Cornish. Kayla is a local skincare and makeup expert and an independent pink Cadillac sales director with Mary Kay. Her joy is to support busy women by creating simple and personalized beauty routines. She is the wife to her husband Christian and proud mama of 4 kiddos, and get this, all age 5 and under.
It's unreal.
On today's episode, we'll be talking with Sonny and Kayla about being a Jesus girl in the business world, and that would make a really great book title.
Yes, it would. Write it.
Next book.
Yes. So Kayla, you are a Jesus girl in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find there's a struggle in owning your faith while you're owning a business?
Yeah, I would think that there's a challenge there, and I think it's a challenge to want to feel the resistance of incorporating both, but I feel like as a Jesus girl, we have no option. It's like God is our CEO, and to combine the two really is our only purpose, I see, as a businesswoman, as a Jesus girl as well, because our role is to glorify Him and to point people back to Him. And so there is a struggle, and I think that that's something to navigate. You know, as a Jesus girl, you have to navigate what that looks like.
So good. I've never heard that. God is the CEO.
Yeah,
I love that. I'm taking that on. That's
my thought process.
That's stolen. I love that. Well, and you said it's not an option, rather than it being, well, this is the compartment that God lives in, the compartment business lives in. It's like He's overarching. How is there an option to not have Him there? For you, there isn't. For any of us Jesus girls. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah, and I almost wonder too that if there is a Jesus girl who wants to own a business, I think the compartmentalizing sometimes can almost freeze us from developing into who He wants us to be as a businesswoman, because we're trying to keep them separate. And really He put us in business on purpose.
Well, and authenticity is something people want. They want transparency, and you can spot someone who is compartmentalizing. Like, it's, people want to know you're a mom, and there is no take that hat completely off. Like, you might be not at home, but you're still a mom, and there's no taking the Jesus hat off. So I love how you framed that.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to know, with you just being such a strong businesswoman, how do you show up authentically in both realms and almost mix the two?
Yeah.
In ministry and in business.
We did a Cherry conversation about personalities, and then I discovered something entirely new. And that's you can find out your personality, and I know, okay, Enneagram, I'm a 7, or I'm a sanguine in temperaments, and I can figure that out. But I just learned something, that actually it's normal to have your personality change a bit according to situation. The situation, the environment. Well, a lot of people feel guilty about that. They think, well, this is who I am when I'm comfortable, but then I change into a new person. We don't. We just situationally, we do adjust to our environment. And for some of those situations, it's good we change, we adapt, we adjust. I can't be the same type of personality at home as I can be at work. At the same time, I am the same human being. Yes. And so the transparency is that I am the same person. I am always Sonny. I'm always a mom, a wife, and my priorities are always the same. But how that comes out is not me being two-faced or compartmentalizing. It's me being situationally aware. Yes. And I thought that is such a good thing to know, that I can't even just say, this is who I am, always, because we'll feel guilty when we're at work and we're doing a little bit more on budget and finances. And if we don't realize that we have to adjust a little to go into that mode to get business done, we're not being a non-Jesus person. We just are having to work in that arena. And then when I can be at church and I can have someone in a business say to me, Sonny, how does it work, the whole Jesus thing? I don't have to say to myself, no, you can't talk about it. I just step over into that vein of, so it's almost like the expectation is I'm going to ebb and flow all day long and just see what I need to let come out, what I need to hold back. But that's not me being two-faced or not authentic.
Yeah, and I think the discernment, you know what I think you were getting at too, is like we
Yes.
discern who and what we bring out of ourselves
Yes.
in the situation. And I think too, we're always growing and changing.
Yeah.
And so the person we are next year could show up a little differently just because
Absolutely.
of how we've grown in business and then outside of our business.
Well,
too.
and Paul says in the Bible that we need to be all things to all people, and that can seem like, wow, what does that mean? That means being situationally aware. In fact, he was talking about if these people don't eat meat, then don't eat meat around them. You can go a meal without meat
Yes.
because, or they're kosher, and so they don't mix the meat and the milk. And even today in Israel, we went into McDonald's and there was the McDonald's normal side and there was the kosher side. There was a counter where there was a wall at the counter between two sections of the counter. The kosher side is where they didn't sell milkshakes. They didn't mix milk and meat because that's being kosher. So for me to just be aware that I'm discerning the people I'm with, like
Yes.
if I start talking about Jesus and what Paul says in the Bible, and these people are like, walls go up, I know they're not receptive. Okay, then be aware. But then I walk in a room and I know they're fully aware of my faith. They're super curious. Then I can be a little more out there because, like you said, I'm discerning the people
Yes.
to know when do I go ahead and step forward and say this, when do I not.
I like that. First of all, I like that you said milk.
Milk bag.
Milkshake. I mean, I like that. But when you're talking about like the being authentic, you had a question about being misunderstood.
Yes.
And so maybe like when you learn this authenticity thing, that helps with the misunderstanding. But the question you had about being misunderstood, like some people who see you as this Jesus girl maybe don't understand why you have this passion and this drive to have all these different endeavors. So maybe ask that question or expound on that a little bit, because that is such a great question that I think a lot of listeners and viewers who are in this situation probably have come against.
Yeah, I think that what I've noticed in the church world, just in general, that there can sometimes be a misconception around business people,
Yeah.
or even being in business. And especially like I've come from the ministry, you're in ministry, also doing business, and there can be misunderstanding on both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
You know, where people in the church or Christian Jesus people will not understand building wealth and business and the purpose in that. But then on the flip side of it are the ones not maybe Jesus people, and also there's a misunderstanding too around business and
Yeah.
what you're doing. So how have you handled being misunderstood, and how do you move through that as a Jesus girl?
It's a hard one because I actually grew up in a family that had money who were business owners. They weren't in ministry. I didn't grow up in a pastor's household. So I did come from, we were a large employer in town, my dad was, and he wasn't even in ministry, and people didn't like him, didn't like my mom, didn't like us as a family, because who do they think we are? Yet they were employed by my family getting their paycheck. And my dad was delivering cheeseburgers 3 times a week just to their truck window, loving on them. And it didn't make sense because they're getting their paycheck from the person they're mad at for making the money, but it's like they opened up an opportunity for you to make money and get a raise and be treated well. So even when you're in business, I think there's people that look to you and go, it isn't fair, it's not right. So then add the in ministry, because I did go the other direction. So I went as someone who's in ministry. Sean didn't come from money, and I was like, yay, let's do this. Let's be poor. Like, let's be poor and people will like you. And let's be like poverty stricken and have all these
'Cause
friends.
This is how we can serve.
Yes,
Jesus.
and then of
Yeah.
course we're in ministry, so it'll look good if we have like raggedy cars and we barely have a house and the heat went out. I mean, people will just think, look at us suffering for Jesus. So
And
I
some
went
have that mindset.
Oh, for sure. Still, there's people that they would say that's how you should live. Okay, but then finally, as I'm like evening out the pendulum, I realized that when I'm poor, when I am in poverty, I actually need people to give me money. Personally, I need help to buy a new mattress because we're so poor, because we're just not getting any money in the ministry, and then we're giving it all away. But I don't have any money to give away. So when I realized if we do a business and the church owns the building, they're making the money on the rent, and us doing that business began to bring in income for the church, which then meant the church could do more. And I thought, why can't I do that personally? If I make more as a human being, as a personal person, not a pastor, and I'm tithing, the more money I make personally, the more I can give to my church.
Yes.
And so wouldn't it make sense that God wouldn't want me or need me to have wealth for me, but for me to have wealth to give it back to the kingdom, to God, is actually super godly. I'm not saying gimme, I'm actually now saying here, take it.
As a funnel.
As a funnel. I'm a funnel, and the more that I give, the more I'll get. And so Sean and I just went from tithing 10% to giving 20%, and we are doing better. And nothing changed. I mean, we have businesses, but that is God's economy. And I told Sean, I said, because we have a couple things coming up, a book deal, there will be an advance. And I thought, I wonder, and I didn't do it for this reason, but I wonder if the book advance I'll get now will be double or triple what it would have been when I was tithing 10%. Because now my 20% is that much more. Why wouldn't God use me as a funnel, as a feeder back into the ministry? So I think I just come to grips with it now, to know I come from a family of business owners, of entrepreneurs. I believe God does want me to be someone who does good with my money, and so I have money. Because I think I'm overthinking poverty is good. Yes. Poverty is noble. I'm not saying that it's awful. I'm saying it is a struggle, or it wouldn't be called poverty. And I don't think I'm meant to struggle. I think I'm meant to thrive so that I can help others thrive. Because if I'm struggling, I can't help others out of the struggle. So I'm actually just in this new season of understanding that this late in the game.
I almost too, when I think of that money flow, that funnel, that we receive more based on the value we give to the world. So we are receiving more because if we're adding value, it's almost like an exchange of value. And
So good.
so I love that mindset. That's helped me come to grips with it. And I think that I really relate to the poverty mindset, because I think at one point in my Jesus journey, I thought I had to be a missionary in a third world country to be sold out for Jesus.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had this contradiction within me when I felt called to business and knew that he was calling me to business. I felt like, how can I do business and do this poverty lifestyle?
Yeah.
And you can't do both, but you can still have the same heart and the same mindset of like, I glorify the Lord in whatever I do.
Right.
And so attracting people to you so that you can share the gospel, whether you're a missionary or a pastor or a businesswoman or all of the above. Yeah, it's all about pointing people back to him.
And I think the love of money, that's different than
Yes,
having money.
absolutely.
Having money isn't evil. The love of money is evil.
Yes.
And then the non-generous spirit, that's where we get in trouble. But
Yes.
if I'm not generous with $10, I'm not going to be generous with 1,000. I'm not going to be generous with 100,000. So I'm glad God worked it out in me to say, okay, your tithe isn't very much. You don't make much money, but I need you to do it. So then you get there, you do it, and then you give a little more, and you go, I like being generous, or it feels right to be generous. And that generosity is what counteracts the love of money and that being evil.
The gratitude with that. And I think also when you're new in business, I think really being obedient and disciplined with your money management. I think this is huge in the Christian business world, is that we can bring and show people like the goodness of God by just us being disciplined with what he's already given us, because then there will, we trust that he will provide more so we can give him more glory.
Right. But don't you think that there's been people that have made people who have money look bad? Like they've made money look bad.
Absolutely.
So we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
But why do we never look at that and go, people who don't have money make poor people look so bad? People who have money make money look so bad. Like that, but isn't that the enemy? Like he just gets us fixated on that you have too much. But I find that the people, even the people who worked for my dad, who my dad loved on them. I mean, he was getting out in South Dakota weather, below zero temperature, saying, don't open your door, don't get out of your truck. He owned a mining business. don't get out. And he'd get out and he'd take the cheeseburger that was wrapped in tin foil 3 times to keep it nice and warm for him. And they started calling him Jackie Paper because he would write on a Post-it note, have a great day, love, Jackie. His name's Jack. I mean, it's so funny. He would call, but my dad was always like, I'm the boss, but I'm going to bring myself down to the level of loving my people, my team, my staff. And so love Jackie. And then he would put it on a Post-it, he'd put it on their window and he'd say, just roll it down just a little. And he'd slip the cheeseburger in so that the guys didn't even have to get out of their truck, be cold, and he would serve them. And yet he still was hated by some. But the ones that hated him, they just struggled with jealousy. They struggled with this bitter thing that even his love couldn't counteract. So that was a them issue.
Wow. So this definitely got a little juicy. I mean, that's juicier than like money. But I love that conversation because money is always a very hard conversation to have, especially when you're talking about being a Jesus person, and there's definitely misconceptions. So great question. We're gonna take a quick break, but stay with us because when we come back, we're gonna continue talking with Kayla and Sonny all about Jesus and business. Welcome back. We're here with Kayla and Sonny, and we've been talking all about being a Jesus person in the business world. And sometimes as a business owner, the only thing people see are your successes or your failures. Yeah. But there's an unseen side of business. So what does that look like for you ladies?
Yeah, I would say that's probably a majority of our business that people don't understand, is that a lot of what we do is behind the scenes, working with our clients, or even just the tough things that we are disciplined about, like our booking calls or paperwork or whatever that looks like for you in your business. And a lot of times, our obedience to God is in those unseen times. Yeah. So, Sonny, what have you done to really allow yourself to be in those unseen times and be content, knowing that 90% of that work or 80% isn't seen by the world? How do you find contentment in that?
I think I have to remind myself often, if not daily, weekly, that what I do in the private. I love the story of David, and that David hid out in a cave. And he hadn't done anything wrong, but he was being pursued. Someone was trying to go after his life. And so he hid out in a cave. And that doesn't seem fair, but it was a time of preparation, because when the moment came that he needed to make his mark, he knew so much more. He even knew more about his enemy. He knew more about the surroundings, and going to that cave, that away place to prepare yourself, because later in life, when he became king, and I love that David is historically proven, like National Geographic talks about David. There isn't like, oh, he was just a Bible character. No, he was a king. He is in the history of line of kings. And he would retreat when his son is about to die. He would retreat to pray. When he did wrong, he'd retreat to repent. And in the waiting, he would retreat and he would seek God, so that when he was in the spotlight, he knew not just the safe place, but the difficult place is when you have to retreat and seek God. So I don't feel like anything that's coming out publicly that I'm doing, that I'm involved in, has anything to do with everything I did out in the public. It's a reflection of what God has told me to do in the private. Yes, and so my time in the morning, if I have more time in the morning, I am better when I get out in public. Then add that up 3 times, 4 times a week. Then the next week, I'm a better business owner, pastor. I write better because of that time in the unseen. And some of that unseen time is a struggle. Like David was struggling. He's asking why. He wasn't like, oh, Jesus, I love my time with you. He's like, this stinks and I hate life right now. And so it's wrestling through that, thinking about, God, how do I deal with this difficult employee? How do I deal with this difficult person I can't seem to not work with in my business? How do I fix me? And I can only fix me. I can only work on me. What do you want me to do? It's massive. It's like you said, it's the 80, the 90% of what we do, because nobody was an overnight success. No movie star, no singer, no author. I mean, some of the authors we now know are incredible wrote 25 books. And now we're like, oh, have you read their first book? They're awesome. And they wrote all these cruddy books. Or they're not that bad, but they put in all this time and effort, didn't get the spotlight, but they were doing that back in the unseen, in the private.
Yes, and then just having faith that when we are in those unseen times, that the Lord is using those seed planting moments that no one can see, the world cannot see, that He is going to develop those into what He wants them to develop into.
Yeah, which is funny because Cheery Conversations is exactly that. I don't know the questions you guys ask ever, and that's on purpose. I thought, and I kind of think it's because I probably do better on the fly. My personality is, I don't want to overthink it, over-script it. The reality is, what I do when I'm spending time with Jesus is just preparing for when somebody asks me a question, or do you want to become a partner in this business? I, in that moment, didn't have to say, let me get back to you in 3 weeks. I'm going to go and do a pros and cons list. I'm going to talk to Sean. I'm going to pray on it. Like, I knew all of this quiet time with Jesus for years has prepared me for the moment I'm asked. Now, I don't always make a decision on the spot or have a conversation on the spot, but think about the conversations you have with your team or with clients, that you're on the spot in that moment. And you don't get to say, can I get back to you on everything? Some things you do, and you're wise to say, let me get back to you on that. But a lot of things, you're just on the spot. And Cheery Conversations would be an exact example of that. That the things that come out of these conversations, I know next week I better fill up so that the next time we record these, that God's revealed stuff to me about Joseph's life, about Paul, that can relate to real life, juicy topics.
Yes, being aligned with the Lord, I think, just equips us to be totally ready for whatever He has for us in business. And whoever we come across on a daily basis, because we are aligned with Him in the private time, we are equipped to make those decisions.
That's
I love
so
that. That's beautiful.
That's so good. Okay, so I have a question, and it's the opposite of private.
It's the opposite of private. Oh boy.
So while you ladies are talking, it makes me kind of think about the view people have of Jesus people in the business world. So you know how celebrities are in the spotlight, and sometimes a celebrity will say, oh, well, they're role models, and sometimes they'll say, well, I don't want to be a role model. That's not what I signed up to do. But the reality is, you're in the spotlight. You're going to be seen. You're a role model. So the same goes for Jesus people in the business world. They own a business, or they just have like a leadership position, and they're known Jesus people. Do you think it is fair that people then put you at a different standard than someone who maybe isn't walking out their faith publicly? Because to be honest, if people know that you love Jesus and you're a Jesus person, they're going to be watching you. One, to maybe learn from you, but there is the reality that some people are also watching to see you fail. Because maybe they just have a different perspective of what Jesus people are. So do you think that's fair, that as you are a pronounced Jesus person in your business, that people hold you to a different standard?
I think it's fair because the Bible warned us that if you are faithful with the little, which most people who are influencers in a good way, they were faithful with the little, so He'll give them more, and then you have to be faithful with a lot. Now, on the flip side of the people who it's not because they're faithful, they've just blown up, they're still influencers. And I think it's interesting we now use this word influencer, like really it's saying what has always been. Someone in the spotlight is influencing people. Someone who is a crabby boss is an influencer. And they should be not being crabby, because they are letting that trickle down and affect everybody under them. And a crabby, mean-spirited boss is really affecting the children of an employee. Because that employee comes home angry and strung out and also feeling devalued, so then they don't give words of value to their kids. And then does that go a generation deep? And then those kids grow up and their children are devalued, all because an influencer did wrong. So I think it's fair for Jesus people, and I think we better push forward. I think when an author comes out or a TV show comes out, and it's just, I haven't watched it, but the 90 Day Fiance, that's something that's out, or The Bachelor, and it's like, try it all out, try all these girls out, or The Bachelorette. That is influencing people. That's making my daughter think 90 Day Fiance, Bachelor, Bachelorette. I mean, if you just kiss or sleep with multiple people to figure out who you really want. Okay, well, we better come and counteract that as influencers. Like, why should the church and why should Jesus people shrink down and say, well, that's Hollywood? No, like, we have to be the opposite voice saying no. Like, you wait till you find that one, and you're gonna know in your spirit, not because you tried it out, was he a good kisser, was it all of the lights and action? It was, I know because I feel a peace in my spirit. I want to be that voice to women and to girls, so we better step it up. I totally believe it's the time for Jesus people to be influencers more than they ever have, and they have to get out of the four walls, because the only people who are gonna hear it from the four walls are the people that come to the church and they choose it. But I don't choose to know Kim Kardashian's life, yet I still hear about it. I still see it. I see the effects of Victoria's Secret models that my son walks by in the mall, and my husband. I don't get that choice. So why should I not think I won't give the world the choice, but to hear about Jesus, that they can stumble upon cheery conversations, or they can open Life and Culture magazine, and sorry, but it's in your face. If you're going through grief and depression, Jesus is an answer. Just as much as Victoria's Secret model trickled down this nasty view of women, let's be just as bold.
Yes, and I love that so much, that it's almost like it's not like whether it's fair or not. I think it's a true honor that we get to be women of integrity in our businesses, and to truly live out the scripture in what we do, because we get to point people back to him. And I think there's a difference between people who are Christian and just own a business versus business women who want it to be like kingdom focused, gospel centered. And I think that when we are in influencing positions and we have the honor to be able to represent him, that it's not necessarily about being, if this is fair or not, but it's more about like, wow, we get,
what an honor.
What an honor.
It's a perspective change, right?
To Jesus.
Yes. So good.
That is great. I love how this is wrapping up influencer. Like, that is such a great word. And today's conversation was based about, if you're a business owner, if you're a Jesus person in the business world, but really Sonny and Kayla are talking about being influencers, and people don't have to be business owners to be influencers. I'm an influencer in my home because I'm a mom, or I'm an influencer at my job because I help lead people. So keep that in mind, that you are an influencer and we get to represent Jesus. I love that. So thank you so much for joining us today in this conversation.
If you'd like to connect with me further, you can go to sonnyhennessy.com. I would love to know what you'd want to hear on the show. Guests like Kayla, she was amazing. Do you have someone you think should be on our show? You can just go to sonnyhennessy.com, connect with me directly.
Join us next week at the same time for another cheery conversation.